So the title that I'll be addressing today is in relation to my mini dissertation. So it is Women in South African Mining, a critical analysis of gender norms and the state of legislative gender transformation in South African coal mining operations. At the moment, it's just an interim title. So just to give a brief background, there's an African proverb which states that "Watinte bafazi, watinte mbokot," which translates to "You strike a woman, you strike a rock." Over the years, gender equality has gained prominence in various social, political, and corporate discourses worldwide. There has been considerable research interest in women in mining in many countries, including South Africa. Historically, men are perceived as providers who hold a certain level of power over women. The latter, on the other hand, is perceived to be submissive, and a natural hope, partly due to inadequate access to education, lack of substantial and reliable source of income, tends to accept male repression. For that reason, she has been viewed as incapable of making independent decisions. Hence, whenever she does, her decisions are rarely recognized. Okay. The mining industry is a male-dominated environment believed to symbolize masculine or rather macho occupational culture due to its male-dominated and intense physicality makeup. Even scientifically, women are regarded as human species of inferior masculinity relative to their male counterparts. This perception has further been perpetuated by the socialization of gender roles that emphasizes different roles for men and women, and which resulted in gender-related occupational discrimination, which inevitably made the mining industry a relatively hostile climate for women. Previous South African research indicates that apartheid significantly influenced the crafting of male-dominated mining occupational culture through the policies and legislation which were characterized by gender and racial inequality. During the apartheid era, women were prohibited from working in mines, underground and in the plants, except where they assumed support, administrative and other marginal roles. This prohibition was promulgated through the South African Minerals Act 51 of 1991, which specifically forbade women from working underground and in mining plants. To continue. However, research indicates that the apartheid laws were not applied equally to women of various racial groups. White women had more privileges. Sorry about that. Okay. White women had more privileges compared to Black women and other minority groups, and they were allowed to occupy administrative roles, whilst Black women occupied other marginal roles in most sectors. As a result of the discriminatory acts, integration and the involvement of women in the mining industry remained slow. In 1994, South Africa elected a new democratic government, and apartheid was replaced by democracy. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996 was promulgated with the aim of promoting the rights of all its citizens, regardless of their race, gender, class, and disability. Since the dawn of the new constitutional dispensation, South Africa has implemented a number of policies and legislative frameworks which are aimed at incorporating women in coal mining operations. Firstly, we saw the Mines, Health and Safety Act repeal the restrictions that were set for women in mining. Secondly, the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, the MPRDA, which was accompanied by the Broad-Based Socio-Economic Empowerment Charter for South African Mining Industry of 2002, which is also referred to as the Mining Charter, was developed by the Department of Mineral Resources. This charter requires 20% of Black women to occupy seats on the board and middle management. 25% should occupy positions in junior management. 15% should occupy positions in both top management and senior management. Other legislative measures, such as the Employment Equity Act, PUPUDA, and affirmative action measures, which were designated to ensure that suitably qualified persons from designated groups have equal employment opportunities and are equitably represented at all occupational levels in the workplace. These measures were put in place to redress the inequalities and to ensure meaningful involvement of the historically disadvantaged South Africans, women in this regard. Notwithstanding the above, it should not be construed to mean that physiological and physical composition of women should be ignored in circumstances where it matters. Instead, they should constitute an invitation to the government and other interested stakeholders lens when considering women inclusion. There are socio-economic factors occasioned by the deployment of women in underground environment. Inter alia, health and safety concerns, physical ability, infrastructural facilities, and workplace relations. In that regard, a novel approach to gender equality will assist in addressing the challenges faced by the mining sector insofar as women inclusion is concerned. Consequently, this study will extrapolate specific provisions of the MPRDA read together with the Mining Charter, the Employment Equity Act, PUPUDA, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and the Labour Relations Act. Furthermore, the study will evaluate the international legislative progress made towards eradicating gender imbalances in the sector. The research will also consider the historical analysis of various jurisdictional legislative frameworks. But this study will be limited to investigating gender equality in the South African underground coal mining operations. So the objectives of the research. Firstly, it is to examine the holistic gender transformational strands engaged in South African mining industry since the new democratic dispensation, to evaluate the impact of the current legislation policy in addressing gender inequality gap in underground mining operations, to evaluate the socio-economic factors influencing the employment of female mine workers in coal mining operations, and lastly, to present suitable recommendations where viable. So my research proposal has two research questions. I've divided them into primary and secondary research questions. So my primary research question is the holistic gender transformation in South African coal mining operations possible through the current legislative framework? Secondary research questions. What is the status of gender transformation in accordance with the current legislative framework in South African coal mining operations? Has the current legislative framework succeeded in addressing gender inequality gaps in South African coal mining operations? What are the legislative barriers against women in South African coal mining operations? And lastly, what are the socio-economic factors in accordance with the current legislative framework in influencing the deployment of female mine workers in coal mining operations? My purpose statement. The aim of the research is to investigate factors widening the gender inequality gap amongst the South African coal mining operations. Under the current legislative framework, the research seeks to investigate how legislation has been used to facilitate gender inequality in the mining labor sector. The research assesses the current legislative framework to see if it has addressed gender inequality, and if not, what has been the challenges and how best they can be overcome. The study will be limited to investigating gender equality in South African coal mining operations. To some extent, the research findings may not be conclusive, as the research will not be conducted on an empirical basis to assess the actual working circumstances of the mining sector. My literature review. The research will evaluate specific South African labor legislation, such as the Employment Equity Act, the Labour Relations Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, as well as mining-specific, the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, and the Mining Charter for South African Mining and Mineral Industry of 2002 and its successive amendments, amongst others. This study will appraise the progress facilitated by the existing legislative framework since the era of democracy in South Africa. The inclusion of South African women in underground mining activities is still flawed with challenges ranging from legislative gaps, health and safety related concerns, lack of innovative infrastructure that accommodates women, amongst others, and the following legislative frameworks will be evaluated. Firstly, The Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act, read together with the Broad-Based Socio-Economic Empowerment Charter for South African Mining Industry. The MPRDA is a huge breakthrough in the holistic transformation of South African mining sector. The object of the MPRDA is to include women into the mainstream of the South African mining sector through the promotion of opportunities and advancement of socio-economic welfare of all South Africans. The Act reiterates the state's commitment to facilitate the equitable access of the country's mineral wealth to all South Africans through the eradication of discrimination. On the other hand, the Mining Charter aims to facilitate the economic inclusion into mining of the previously disadvantaged people such as women through the utilization of existing skills base. Ideally, the aim of both the MPRDA and the Mining Charter is to see women inclusion materializing into active participation and for them to inherit from the nation's natural with women inclusion should not be merely about the increased number of women joining the industry without the actual progress for them. Thus, Section 2F of the MPRDA aims at promoting employment and advancing the social and economic welfare of all South Africans, women included. Although this may be the case, women still struggle to navigate developmental phases in the industry, despite the Act's express reaffirmation of providing opportunities for women's active participation in the industry. These views are also expressed by most women in the industry. Secondly, the Mine Health and Safety Act. The Mine Health and Safety Act provides for the health and safety guidelines to persons within the mining environment in South Africa. Essentially, its object is to establish monitoring and inspection systems, as well as conducting investigations on incidences that threaten the health and safety of the mine environment. The mining sector is regarded as one of the professions with the highest number of deaths, injuries, and diseases per occupation and industry. Moreover, the mining sector entails hard labor, often in confined spaces and small and narrow reef extraction that require high heat tolerance. The Mine Health and Safety Act sets out the circumstances and the parameters under which an employee may refuse to work in dangerous conditions. Yet, with such legislative protection, there is still an abundance of health and safety concerns experienced by women in underground mining. This speaks to the lack of application, implementation, and monitoring mechanism of this Act. Thirdly, the Promotion of Equality and Prevention Unfair Discrimination Act, PEPUDA in short. PEPUDA prohibits the denial of access to opportunities, services, or contractual opportunities to anyone based on gender, or failing to take reasonable steps to accommodate the needs of the person sought to be protected by the Act. The Act further makes provision for an exemption
Kamogelo?
to unfair discrimination. Hello?
Apologies, Kamogelo. This is just a 5-minute warning.
All right. To continue. This Act further makes provision for an exemption to unfair discrimination when such is being exercised to advance the cause of the previously disadvantaged, such as women. Yet, with such legislative provisions, the majority of underground female miners in South Africa still do not have access to decent ablution facilities, personal protective equipment, PEEs in short, designed for their comfort and safety among other needs. The Employment Equity Act. Okay. This Act promotes diversity in South African workplace by legislatively emphasizing on equal opportunities to all employees. The Act's reaffirmation to the inclusion of the historically disadvantaged persons is confirmation and commitment to the view that the mining industry, through the lens of a diversified law, it has been illustrated that the EEA does not depict universality in all mining companies in the country, and to a certain extent, it does not cater for the daily experiences of underground female miners. And lastly, we have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. The mining sector is mostly characterized by work done outside ordinary normal working hours. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act is important for the regulation of employees' working hours and days, especially to female miners who run a dual set of duties concurrently, as mine workers as well as home caregivers. Despite the above legislative provisions, incidences of rape, murder, and robberies of female miners on their way to work in South Africa is not unusual. Furthermore, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act is not clear as to whether it protects employees before and after the birth of the child by prohibiting pregnant or nursing employees from performing work that is hazardous to their health or the child's. The employer is obliged to find suitable alternative employment for a pregnant employee whose terms and conditions are not less favorable from her ordinary employment. This also poses a level of uncertainty by the Act. Thank you.